Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session titled Asynchronous versus Synchronous Training Effect on TCOM Certification Reliability Scores, presented by Lauren Mergen and Melody Atschuler. My name is Elizabeth Crowley, and I'll be your room moderator during this session. So if you need any assistance, like technical difficulties or have any questions, just submit a question in the chat and I will get to you. So before we start, let's just go through a couple guidelines. All participants are automatically muted to prevent background noise. Please make sure that your Zoom name matches the name that you use to register for the conference. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, so please send your questions to the chat box. And if you are we're offering CEs for this session, so make sure you complete the survey on the app and do your best to stay for the rest of the session. So let's get started.
All right, so hi everyone, my name is Lauren Mergen. I'm the Distance Learning Director of the TCOM training website, which is at the IF Center at the University of Kentucky. My co-presenter Scott is a little sick today, so he won't be able to be here, but we have my colleague Melody Altschuler who will be helping me out, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Melody. I'm at the IF Center as well, assistant professor.
All right, so I will share my screen here and we can go ahead and get started. All right, so today I'm going to be talking to you about asynchronous and synchronous TCOM training. But before we dive into that, I do want to sort of define what those terms mean for the purpose of this study. So asynchronous is online self-paced learning. So if you think about the TCOM training website, think about those ANS courses or ANSA courses that you go into and you click on each of the steps and do the quizzes and watch the videos sort of at your own pace. That is the asynchronous training that we're referring to. And a synchronous training is synchronous online. So that will be live training, but not in person. So it'll be online only, kind of like we're doing right now. It'll be a Zoom training. And the purpose of this study is to sort of get an idea of what impact our trainings are having so that we can kind of better tailor them for our users. Before we jump into that, I'll just give you a quick history lesson on TCOM training. So back in 1999, way back when, we had Dr. Lyons. He would do all in-person trainings and he would do paper certification tests. So if any of you were around back then, John used to kind of run around the globe with his training deck, and he would present the CANS ANSA FAST to everyone that was at his training. And then at the end, he would pull out a paper vignette, hand them out, and then he would take them in, grade them using SPSS, and then he would actually go home and sign every single certificate and snail mail them out to everyone. So it was quite a bit of work. In 2012 is when I came around. And so we had this idea to start this online training platform. We started with this group called InMotion, which eventually rebranded to Learner Nation, which I'm sure some of you here might remember. And they were really, really fantastic. They were a startup. We gave them their startup money, and in turn, they gave us this really cool, customizable online learning platform. So we still did a lot of in-person trainings. And when I say we, I mean Dr. Lyons. I was not doing in-person trainings, but John was still running around all over the country, training people in TCOM and the different tools. But what changed was we had this really cool online training website that folks could now go to certify. So this really centralized our certification and allowed us to keep all of our training records all in one spot. Now, we did at this time have the option to do asynchronous self-paced online learning, but I believe in-person training was much more popular. Of course, we still did have some folks use the online portion, but the in-person was much, much more popular. Around 2012, 2015, our team grew and we got quite a few more trainers, which was really great. But also our online training, asynchronous training grew quite a bit as well. In 2018, Learner Nation was bought out by the company we all know as Skooks. So Skooks is a LMS system based in Greece, and they have a really robust system. I have done so much research on the different LMS systems, and I can tell you that Skooks really is one of the best out there. And they provided us with the ability to add a bunch of really cool new features. One of them was actually posting the registration on the TCOM training website, which gave us so many more options in terms of keeping all of our data in one spot. So it was really good for us. Now, at this time, we still did do in-person training, but in 2020, as we all know, there was the pandemic. So we were kind of forced to shift all of our trainings to the live space, the live online space. Weren't sure how it was going to work out, but it worked out really great. Our trainings didn't slow down. In fact, I think they increased because we were able to reach places that we weren't really able to reach before just due to travel restrictions. And then once the pandemic kind of ended, we didn't really get a request for in-person training so much. I think since the pandemic, we may have done 2, 3, if any of the trainers are on the call and want to correct me, please do. But we did not get a request for a lot of in-person training. So we continue to offer live online. Now for this study in particular, we wanted to know if there was a practical difference in learning efficacy between asynchronous, self-paced, and synchronous live online training formats for the TCOM tools. So for this particular study, we only looked at 2 variables. We looked at first-time reliability score on the certification vignette, and then we looked at the number of certification vignette attempts a person needs to take before they pass. So there are other variables we could have looked at, things like perception of learning, motivation for learning, all that fun stuff. But for the purpose of the study, we really just wanted to know, is there a connection between the type of training that a person attends and their certification score? So our hypothesis was that folks who train in a live online setting will perform better on the certification vignette than people who trained using the online course asynchronously. Now, this was our hypothesis because this is sort of what we had heard from everyone, trainees, trainers. It just kind of seemed like the logical conclusion to us. We did survey our trainers, and 5 out of the 6 believed that live training would perform better. And we have this quote here from one of our trainers. It says, "I believe the live training format is more effective as it gives the attendees the opportunities to ask questions in regards to the training. This also gives them familiar contacts to reach out to when they have a question or need support after the training." So that's very valid and very true, which is why we did believe that the live online setting would have a higher reliability score. So a quick study overview. The setting was a TCOM training website, which currently hosts about 133,000 active users. So this number is quite large, and it is not the total number of users we've ever had certified on the TCOM training website. It's a total of active users, currently active users. So these are all people who are currently certified online. The website hosts 621 online training courses, which might be a surprise to some folks, but it is mostly different variations of the different tools. So we have different locations that customize the tools, and each one gets their own custom course. Of course, we do have some additional trainings, none that are certification related, but they are just kind of like extra learning type trainings. And this site, like I said before, stores and manages all of our training and certification data, which is why we were able to actually complete this study. So our methodology was a comparative analysis of asynchronous and synchronous online training formats. And we did a retrospective analysis of certification data from 2018 to 2022. Now, the person who actually did our analysis, Gavin Ryan, He used to work at the center. However, he got a fantastic opportunity in Washington, so he has left. So I wouldn't be able to answer too many data analytics questions, but I can certainly answer some. The participants for this training, we had a total of 163,948 participants, which is huge. Our asynchronous group, so the self-paced group, was 160,459. And then our live training synchronous group was 3,489. Like we spoke about earlier, our measures were the primary outcome was reliability score on first certification vignette, and our secondary was the number of attempts required to pass the certification vignette itself. So on to the results. We have two charts here, box and whisker charts. The one on the left is going to show you the average reliability score of the initial certification vignette attempt. And the one on the right is going to show you the average number of attempts on certification vignette before passing. The reddish color is our asynchronous, so the online self-paced. And the bluish greenish color is the synchronous live format. So in the chart on the left, you can see that the asynchronous group slightly lower performance in some years. In other years, it's equal. But what sticks out the most to me is that with all years except for 2018, the asynchronous group, the range falls within the range of the synchronous group and is also much tighter, which is also true in 2018. Now, 2018 might be a little off. We did switch platforms that year, so there is some disruption. But for the most part, you can kind of see a pattern here. So what's really interesting about that is that since there is so much more variability in the synchronous group, it might point to the fact that who the trainer is has an impact on how you perform on the actual certification vignette, which isn't something that we explored, but it is kind of cool to see this variability in the results themselves. Now we don't have a chart here. I do have a chart, but I can send it to anyone who's interested. The actual averages aren't actually that far apart. So they might be like 0.02 or 0.03 apart. So although it does look like the synchronous group has a higher average, it's really by 0.01 or 0.02 points, which is not much. The bigger thing for us was the variability difference between the two. If we move over to the right-hand side, we're looking at the average number of attempts on certification vignette before passing. So same sort of thing here. You can see that 2018 is the only kind of outlier between the group. The rest has a pretty clear pattern where the asynchronous group has a much larger variability than the asynchronous, the live training group, has a much larger variability than the asynchronous group, the self-paced group. Again, it's not really a difference per se. It's less than one attempt difference. So really no practical difference between the two. So for us, what we took away from this data is that when you take into account the average reliability scores, the variability of the scores, and the number of attempts, we did not see any real practical differences between the two groups, which is kind of cool and kind of exciting because it means that we can kind of open up our trainings to different types of trainings, and that our certification training itself, we really can focus it online asynchronous. But I'll let Melody talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, hello. So, what does this all mean in terms of beyond certification? So the first thing that I think is worth thinking about is what are we actually wanting to teach in the trainings, and how does the certification potentially correspond or not correspond with our goals for skills in practice. So, for example, we have talked a lot about what are the soft skills that are needed to have the conversations with children and their families when you're actually doing the CANs or the other assessments. And the certification exam right now is really focused on how do we pass the test, which is important. But just something to think about communometrics, what this means. Is it possible that Lauren's really interesting results about there not being a big difference from synchronous to asynchronous trainings for the test itself means that maybe our resources are better spent for live trainings to be working on these softer skills? Like when we presented in San Francisco, we heard about some of the incredible work that some states are doing. Maybe some of you are on this call, so if you are, please jump in. About trying to do things like teach reflection and mindfulness, and to really pause and say, what are the stories of these families and individuals who are answering these questions? And these are things that you are not going to be captured on the certification exam. Any thoughts or reflections on that first point from anyone in the audience here? What do people think?
One thing I do want to add that we did hear at the in-person training was that folks in different areas have started to think about the order of the trainings that they do. So they've been thinking about when do we do the certification training, which is some feedback that we've heard before, and also something that I know our team has been thinking about. When we offer the live training for certification, a lot of the times people are sitting there knowing that they're going to have to do a test after, which can be a little daunting and a little overwhelming. So a question that we've asked ourselves is it better to just get the certification training over with first, and then they can go to a live training after they've been certified, so that they can really focus on some of these soft skills that we might want to train in the coming metrics portion of TCOM. And with these results, it's kind of reassuring to know that, yes, you could do that, and you're not really going to be sacrificing certification scores by doing that.
Yeah, I think these are really interesting results and provocative, and I would agree with what both of you have said, and that I think that does offer this possibility. And one of the things that I think everybody who's done an implementation knows, that you have this stage where the first stage is you get people to do the CANs. And that may be a reflection of the certification test. They learn how to do the CANs, and then they do the CANs, but they're not really using it, and they're not really embedding it in person-centered care. Well, some people are and some people aren't. But then you get to this stage that we would have been thinking is inevitable. So I think Nate Israel first framed it as the kick the cans phase, where people get sort of frustrated because they've been doing the can, and it just becomes, be frank, a pain in the ass to do. And then that's when you have this moment where you can teach them how to use the cans. But I'm wondering if the result of your study, Laura, is that actually maybe we can jumpstart that process. Maybe we can reduce the time to the kick the cans phase by using more live training to focus on use of the tool rather than doing the tool. Maybe there's these two separate things. I know the research on adult education says that people remember how a training makes them feel, not really what the content is. And so the live training might have to do with inspiration and curiosity, getting people to be thinking about how they can integrate this approach and do person-centered care in their practice. So anyway, kudos for this work. I think it's really important to apply TCOM to TCOM, right? So we would be hypocrites if we didn't.
Yes, thank you, John. I completely agree. And I think that these results justify going in that direction. So look forward to working with all of you to figure out how we could do that. And Lauren being the TCOM online queen over there, figuring out how we can use like we talked about AI and other more sophisticated things that Lauren, through her training in education and online learning, we could figure out how to still balance that with the need to disseminate widely. So it's really exciting direction. So yeah, just start to think about, compassion, soft skills like reflection. Actually, what other skills would be helpful for if we're shifting beyond certification towards how do we do the cans? Any other thoughts or ideas on what skills? Anyone in the audience? It's always fun with the little Zoom black boxes with their videos off. I don't miss the days I taught classes on Zoom during COVID. Okay. So predictive validity and real world application. So, kind of going off of that, something to think about is there a difference between people who are trained asynchronously and those trained synchronously in terms of their performance in the field? So Lauren's thinking about what are some interesting follow-up studies that we might want to do. So this certification and the current study design that we looked at is just looking at this exam that they did right then. But what about over time? How are they going to, in practice, what does this look like? Also, are they remembering things over time? Is there some kind of refreshers that we need to do, both in terms of like learning what the cans is, but especially as we're thinking about trying to make these live trainings more focused on skills for doing the cans. Even then, how do we still assess and maybe think about integrating that with our certification, or expanding what we mean by certification? Just trying to think about, are there ways we can certify these soft skills, right? So it's not just once you pass this test, you're off to the races and can start doing the cans without having what we think are these really important skills for actually doing the cans. So something to think about down the road as well. Anyone have thoughts or ideas, reflections on that point? So reconceptualizing what we mean by learning efficacy. So that's another really important thing to think about is what do we mean by learning efficacy, right? So right now the exam is focused on certain components of what the cans is and how to score it. But if you can pass the test, does that necessarily mean that you understand the cans on a deeper level? So just trying to think going forward how we might, some more creative ways you might be able to correspond what we're measuring for certification and for like we're talking about these soft skills, and maybe incorporating, I'm reading John's comment, and maybe incorporating family, youth, and individual voice into the synchronous training experience. Yes, that's a really great idea. I love that. I think, yeah, like getting off of what you're saying about inspiring the essence of what we want to do in practice and helping children and their families and really incorporating those lived experiences is so crucial for keeping that in the back of our mind, because, for the people who are actually out there doing the work to really be able to it's not just about the soft skills of reflection and mindfulness and really trying to understand people's stories, but to have those lived experiences to help you kind of shape your thinking about why it's important, I think is a really good idea. So
I'm just going to read a comment from Lilia. It says, I think having reflective questions and helping staff understand cans and what is intended to do or to benefit the family.
Oh, I'm so sorry I missed that. Thank you, Lauren. And thank you, Lilia. That's a great point. Lilia, did you want to expand on that? Chat is less scary than talking. I think that's a really great idea. Yeah, I think reflective questions is something that I'd be curious what you and others think that could actually look like, because I think that can mean a lot of different things, and it was a great idea about how do we encourage reflection. There's a lot of research on that, and something that we and like the science of learning that we could try to integrate and putting that wonderful idea into practice. So thank you.
We also have another comment from Sophia Baca. It says, it makes me think of the mock trainings that some of our staff receive, and some jurisdictions that did include mock opportunities to complete the tool as practice.
Oh,
Which this is really cool comment because and I think John just put it in the chat there, we have been developing sort of like an AI application, an AI bot with another group at the University of Kentucky, which almost acts like a tutor to folks. So it acts as a child or a person in care, and then you go in as the provider and ask them questions. And what's really cool about it is that the AI personalities they've developed are actually based on our own certification and practice vignettes. So what they've done is they've fed those vignettes to this model, this large language model, and it creates a personality of the person in that vignette, which is really, really interesting, especially if you know these vignettes well. It kind of brings them to life, but that could be a possible application. It allows people to actually go in and practice and see how a child or a person might respond to the questions that you're asking and how you're asking them.
yeah, thank you. Sophia, I'm curious what jurisdiction you're in or what state you're in, because I think
Ye-
go
Yeah, hi
ahead.
team. Hi everyone. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we're here in Los Angeles in the state of LA, like is known, right? And so I know that it's been a couple years, but there was a presentation way back when, Dr. Lyons, when we were back in Chicago a couple years ago, there was actually a jurisdiction, and I don't remember off the top of my head which one it was that was doing that. There was like even like and I'm thinking it might have been more like in the context of like the mock CFTs, right? Where it was like, we were pushing that a lot, right? That the cans or the amp or a lot of these tools, specifically the cans, was being done more in the context within the CFT meeting. And so I'm thinking that it was more that along the lines of that, right? Like, how do you actually complete the cans within the context of the CFTM? Is what I'm thinking it might have been. But I definitely like the idea, and this picture that you have here looks very similar, y'all, to our LA County CAN certification classes that we had pre-COVID. So I'm glad to, just overall that you all did the work, took the time to look at it. It's great work. It's very exciting news too, Lauren, what you guys just shared.
That just reminded me of something. Another group at the in-person conference had brought up how the nursing schools and the medical schools, they use, standardized patients to actually practice their skills and practice, asking questions and trying to do diagnoses. And we actually do use standardized patients for our videos. They act as stand-ins and actors for us. I'm not sure how feasible it is, but that could be another really cool idea for a training at some point, so that you can kind of practice and have these standardized patients act as the people in care. And so that you can really get in some of those communometric skills and the soft skills in your training.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, Dr. Lyons, I'm always here to help you and your team with the bilingual stuff. So you all let me know.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Sophia.
Yeah, I
I
think
should
that's
say
really
gracias. But
I think
when I talk like that, I'm Anglo.
thanks, John. Yeah, I think that's a really great model, and I love that we're starting to have the conversation about how we can take all these the great work that the different states are doing and try to use the wonderful tools and expertise that Lauren is developing as being the one in charge of the distance learning platform. Like, right, like how do we potentially learn from you to standardize the great work that you're doing to make it part of the training and certification from the beginning? Like, I think that what you're doing to having these like mock examples and like we learned from other states, some other things like encouraging reflection and just, yeah, curiosity and compassion, all these really important things that you're doing, just trying to think through how can we learn from you because you're the ones on the ground doing the work. And I think that back and forth between people in practice and us on the more like, yeah, developing and research side is really critical for advancing this for the better of how do we actually do TCOM in practice. Sophia, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, it made me think about there was somebody that made a comment. I don't know if it was in this meeting or an earlier one about, doing the cans, we say, right, oh, it was done. But if the family doesn't remember or they weren't really a part of it, can we really say that it was done? And for us here in LA, Lilia and I are part of the CFSR team, the state review process and giving that feedback, right? And so it made me think of this, right? Like you're saying, well, what is really happening in practice? And so a lot of the times, maybe when we're actually doing our interviews with our families to get their perspective of what was their experience with us, did they feel like they were a part of the case planning? Did they feel like they had a voice at the cans? Do they know what the cans is? Just those types of things to kind of give that feedback loop, of like we do all this great training, we do all this great implementation, and then are we really seeing it trickle down to the work that we're doing down, on the ground with the families? And then what, if anything, we can do to bridge that gap of that feedback loop to try to, improve our overall practice. So again, really exciting work, y'all. Y'all always blow me out of the water with the amount of amazing work that you do there. So thank you so much again for giving us something else to think about.
Thanks, Sophia. That's really great. I completely agree with you.
I think we have a comment from Kyle Hansen. Kyle, if you want to chime in.
Sure. Yeah, I was just we get a lot of feedback, especially as we're trying to work more with like the interns and students about like how to gather the information. And it's overwhelming to like, I can't train you on how to interact with people and how to be trauma informed and like all the things they want to know in an 8 hour training. And so we're trying to brainstorm like, well, maybe there's some other trainings that we can point them to after, like, hey, here's some other places you could go to learn more about those skills. But yeah, it's kind of overwhelming when, and maybe this is too tangential, but I do worry that like a lot of our professionals are growing up in this digital age where they're used to everything being like social media and that's how you gather information. It's like, no, you just have a conversation with them and you talk about things. Like it just becomes this really scary thing that it shouldn't be scary.
I think that's true, Kyle. It's sort of, I was just at lunch in San Francisco, and there were several tables near us that were people were sitting at the table having lunch together, but everybody was on their phone. It's like, wait a minute, you're having lunch together, right? Put away your phones, right? And so I think there is this kind of interesting moment in time where we have to figure this out and help generations deal with. I mean, there's some incredible advantages that come with technology, and then there's some things that get in the way of the human component of what we're doing a little bit. So figuring out how to negotiate these things are really an important part of what we need to do. But I do think that, one of the reasons why we moved to the YouTube channel for a lot of our dissemination is that the average attention span of people is declining. And so we find, 5-minute videos are sort of like the limit, so we can get one thought, that we can package and give folks, and that's useful. But there may be ways of thinking about the additional skills and putting together a package of those so that we have, a short course on trauma-informed care, and we have a short course on how do you actually collect and integrate multiple storytellers' stories of people, right? And so I think there are those kind of skills that we probably could identify. We started to do a little bit with motivational interviewing because motivational interviewing is a great way to think about the process of having conversations about TCOM tools, right? That they fit together really well. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity if we kind of are thoughtful, and it seems to me kind of happy circumstances that we can teach people how to use the language of the tools with the online course. And so then we can focus the rest of our activities around these other kinds of things, which I think is really where developing the field lies. Not in learning how to do the documentation well. I don't think that's actually a solution on a whole lot of stuff, frankly. But anyway, it's sort of the starting.
John, your comment about the attention span getting shorter may be one of the reasons why the online training is sort of performing as well as the live training. Folks can step away for a second, they can take breaks, they can do it over multiple days if they want to. It's really customizable to their own needs, which with live training, that's not so much the case, right? You might have one break in a 2-hour training, that's 5 minutes, and then everyone's back at their computers. And they may even be answering emails, have something on the other side. We really don't know.
Yes, that is absolutely true. So, and I think that's a really, and I think if I remember your data, Lauren, there was a convergence over time, right? That the more recent were closer than the back in 2018 and so forth, as if our culture is learning how to do asynchronous learning rapidly. So, which would make sense because a lot of stuff moved to that during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes. I also put in the chat a plug for our events on November 1st, because I think it's related to these conversations about technology and soft skills. We're going to be working on really one approach for how to develop some of these soft skills for the events we're organizing on November 1st for the Alliance Against Harmful Anger. So anyone could register if you're interested in continuing.
Please join us. Anger is an epidemic.
What John means is unskillful response to the emotion of anger is an epidemic.
Yes, there you go. All right.
So
you don't have a long enough attention span to hear that entire time.
We'll talk more later. So implications for future TCOM trainings. Like we talked about with rethinking the trainings, how long do we have? Until 1? Is that right? Okay. Rethinking TCOM trainings, what do we want to focus our time on? And it seems like the results of Lauren's study seem to suggest that there's no difference from synchronous versus asynchronous for the certification exam. So it's really great justification for why moving forward, to take advantage of the asynchronous training for that exam and to really focus live on what are these soft skills, why do we care about TCOM, what does this work mean, how do we center the lived experiences and voices of children and families to really motivate and inspire people and who are on the ground doing the work. And like we all talked about, having that back and forth of everyone who's doing the work in practice to inform what we talk about in these trainings. So something that we would love to continue the conversation with and work together to solve these exciting problems. And like some of you talked about, not something else I learned at the conference is that not everyone is using the voices of children in the cans and trying to figure out, okay, well, trying to balance the ideal with the practical. I understand that, some things come up, but really trying to learn from each other, like why is it not always possible? Are there ways that we can try to improve the systems and structures in place to make that more feasible and accessible to everyone? Yes. So finding that sweet spot and the balance between what's the most ideal and what's practical is something that, we'll continue to explore together. And think about what else besides the certification exam can we use as part of both the certification process, but also the ongoing learning process. So we have this one exam, and a question to think about is, how do we actually not just teach these softer skills and important kind of the centering of the lived experiences and the heart behind this work and why we care, but also how do we potentially test that in more creative ways? So there's lots of work on the science of pedagogy and ways that we might be able to assess more creatively about how are we not just teaching but also measuring these softer skills. And something to think about, is that worthwhile? So a lot of Lauren's work and as next steps for what she'll be studying for follow-up and other types of examining the effectiveness of this, it might give us really helpful information about what are other ways that we might want to track and assess these important things of actually doing the CANs and TCOM in practice, and really getting to the best of both worlds with taking advantage of the wonderful technology that we have and these cool AI bots and other complex technology that I don't understand to really try to implement this on a bigger scale, while also taking advantage of when do we really need that live face-to-face interaction to help do what we care about, which is improve the lives of children and their families and have people live to their best potential, and trying to center everything that we do based off of that important goal is something that we will work together to solve. So thank you, Lauren, for this wonderful project, and thank you all.